There is a time of year when I feel compelled to suspend my search for proof and just accept that some things are just unexplainable and downright spooky. There is a pull to indulge in the dark and explore things that go bump in the night. Today, we are looking at the everyday objects, the dresser, the beloved sports car, the child's toy, that are frankly trying to kill you. We are looking at some of the world's most famous haunted objects. Hi, my name is Shelby, and this is Merrily Morbid, the channel where we explore all things that are at least a little bit dark. From deadly diseases to natural disasters, from true crime to man-made catastrophes, and this month, a special spotlight on the spooky for our creepy countdown to Halloween. So if that's your kind of thing, come along and let's get morbid. Let's begin with perhaps the most famous haunted doll in the world, Annabelle. Yes, for those who don't know, Annabelle, the movies are based on a real doll, and surprisingly, unlike the movies, the actual Annabelle doll isn't a porcelain doll, but a Raggedy Ann doll. Now, here is a confession. I am a very morbid person, but I cannot stand horror movies. None of the movies that I mention in this video are ones that I have ever seen or would ever see. To really nail it in, my favorite scary movies are The Others and Sixth Sense, pretty much any Stephen King movie. I'm a wimp, I know. But now that I have that off my chest, let's move on. The real-life Annabelle story begins in 1971 with a 28-year-old nurse living in Hartford, Connecticut. Let's call her Mary. Her mother gave her a large 3-foot Raggedy Ann doll, and it was only a few days before Mary and her roommate began to notice some pretty weird things happening. At first, they just chalked it up to having overactive imaginations, and they actually began to find it oddly fun. In a not less creepy version of Elf on the Shelf, the two women began playing jokes on each other with moving the doll from place to place in different poses. But the joke was on them. Soon, Annabelle, the doll, began moving on her own. The roommates were understandably a little freaked out, and they decided that Mary should take the doll to a renowned medium, and that psychic told Mary that the doll was in fact possessed by a little girl named Annabelle. A seance revealed that Annabelle was a 5-year-old girl who was hit and killed by a car just outside the woman's apartment, Mary's apartment. She was told that the doll was solely possessed by a child spirit. When Mary returned home with Annabelle, she began treating it like a real child, spending time with it, giving it gifts. But evil can't or won't hide its true nature for long. Their haunting experiences began to intensify. They began to hear knocking sounds, seeing lights where there shouldn't be any, random temperature drops, bed shaking, and they even swore that sometimes they could hear the doll growl. At some point, Mary's boyfriend decided that enough was enough and it was time to get rid of the doll. The group decided that they would burn the doll to be safe, and Mary's boyfriend decided he was going to lay down for a nap. When he got up, they would take care of business. Suddenly, Mary's boyfriend woke up completely freaking out. He claimed that in the dream, Annabelle had been strangling him. But to everyone's surprise, or not, he actually had marks on his neck. Had the dream actually been real? The next thing you know, pictures began flying off the wall, the lights were flicking on and off, chairs flew across the room. All the while, Mary's boyfriend was attacked before their very eyes by something they couldn't see. At that point, they all pretty much thought, fuck this, and they contacted a local Episcopal church in Hartford, who relayed them to a now famous couple, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, I will do a whole video on them, so I won't get into their story just now. The Warrens figured that although the doll had probably been just a possessed doll by the little girl spirit, that is, during the seance with the medium, it actually allowed a demon in to possess the doll. The Warrens also concluded that the demon possessing the doll was far too powerful to be safely exorcised, so that the best thing that they could do was to place the doll in their museum, where it could be kept under lock, key, and warding magic. Making it even more creepy, Annabelle was kept in a glass case, backlit with a red light. Her enclosure was mostly made up of wood and features a Devil's Tarot card and a sign that reads, "Warning, positively do not open." Legend says that a man once disrespected the doll by banging on the enclosure. He died in a motorcycle accident not long after leaving the museum. Annabelle was the main attraction of their museum until it closed in 2019. After Lorraine Warren died, that is. In May 2025, the New England Society for Psychic Research, the organization founded by Ed and Lorraine Warren, decided it would be a good idea to bring the doll on tour. Some people expressed excitement over getting to see the Annabelle doll, and others thought it was reckless and a cash grab for the organization. All we can say is that maybe there was some merit to that, because one of the doll's handlers died while on tour of a heart attack at only 54 years old. What I do find interesting is that the coroner actually had to come out and say that Annabelle was not in the hotel room at the time of death. But does that really make a difference to a vengeful spirit? I'll let you decide. It's time for the trivia question of the day. The answer to last video's question regarding the disorder of where a person fakes illness to gain attention was Munchausen's. Shout out to my sister, Nicole, for being the first person to get that one right. Now, for today's question, the first person to comment the correct answer down below will get a shout out in the next video. There is a legend that says homes that even contain replicas of this series of paintings by an Italian painter have a tendency to burn. What are featured in these paintings? In Jewish folklore, there exists a type of spirit called a Dybbuk. It's a restless spirit condemned to wander the earth as punishment for their sins in life. When the Dybbuk finds a person that they can possess, the affected person will often display anxiety and mental illness. This person would then go to a religious mystic, a Jewish mystic, who would perform an exorcism. So imagine how strange it was when in 2003, a story began to circulate about a Dybbuk. The Dybbuk that didn't possess a person, but a wine cabinet used for religious rites, and bad things were happening to the people who came across it. According to the story, a man named Kevin Mannis acquired possession of the so-called Dybbuk Box back in 2001. Its former owner was a 103-year-old Holocaust survivor who lost her entire family. So right there, you know that there's a lot of emotional strife tied into this object. Kevin Mannis acquired the cabinet, but was warned by the former owner to never open the box. So what's a person to do? You buy a haunted object and are told to never open it under any circumstance. Well, duh, you open it. Inside the box were 2 pennies from the 1920s, locks of brown and blonde hair, a granite statue with the word Shalom engraved in it, a dried up rosebud, a golden wine cup, and a black octopus tentacle candlestick. He offered the objects that he found inside back to the former owner's family, but they refused or declined to take the items back. Now, he planned on giving the wine cabinet to his mother, obviously not believing in any curses. His mother's birthday was on October 28th, but due to a last-minute birthday trip, they wouldn't be celebrating until she returned on October 31st, Halloween. Within minutes of giving the cabinet to his mother, she suffered a stroke. She survived, but was physically debilitated, and even in her state, she was able to express that she did not want the cabinet. At that point, Manus gave the cabinet to a series of people: his sister, his brother and wife, and girlfriend, a couple of customers of his furniture business. Each had their own unsettling reasons for returning it to him. The couple, the last of the recipients, only had the cabinet for 3 days before leaving it on the steps of his business with a note that simply said, "This has a bad darkness." He took the cabinet home himself and then began having recurrent nightmares involving an old woman who would transform into a violent demonic being. Things only continued and began to haunt him during his waking hours, too. Fire alarms going off, an overpowering smell of cat urine, only to be followed by the smell of jasmine, shadows of something moving down the hall when he knew he was alone. He reached his limit and decided it was time to get rid of the wine cabinet. He was too scared of what he might unleash had he tried and failed to destroy the box, so he decided to list it on eBay and gave a full description of everyone's experiences as a warning to anyone who may try to buy the box. First, it was bought by a college student who did not keep it for very long and resold it on eBay to one Jason Haxton, who knew that college student's roommate. Haxton, too, began to experience evil, which led him to burying the cabinet in an undisclosed location somewhere in Missouri in an attempt to protect him and anyone and everyone else from this Dybbuk box. Haxton wrote a book in 2011 describing his own experiences with the box. Then in 2016, he dug up the wine cabinet, the Dybbuk box, and donated it to Zach Bagans. Why do I do that? Zach Bagans for his haunted museum in Vegas. Now, that is where, for the most part, the story ends. But if you want to keep the dark magic going, skip ahead to the next object. If you are a skeptic who just loves discrediting ghost stories, this next bit is for you. In October of 2015, Kevin Manus wrote a Facebook post on the page regarding hauntings. In the post, he debunks the entire concept of a Dybbuk box, which became famous with many claiming to own their own Dybbuk boxes. He said, quote, "I am the original creator of the story of the Dybbuk box, which appeared on one eBay post I made back in 2003. The idea that a Dybbuk box has some kind of history prior to my story, and that the idea that a Dybbuk box could contain anything other than a Dybbuk, along with any deviation to the type of contents I created to be found inside of the Dybbuk box, is laughable at best." He even promised to pay $100,000 and have their name tattooed on his forehead to anyone who could prove the concept of a Dybbuk box existing before his eBay listing. All that's to say is that Manus confessed that the entire story behind the box was a hoax and a creative writing experiment. Here is where I ask my new viewers to subscribe to my channel. It costs nothing and helps me out a lot. And in spite of this channel's dark themes, I want it to be a source of light in the world. I ask that you comment, subscribe, like this video, all the things. And to repay your efforts, I promise to donate 10% of everything that I ever make from this channel to charities chosen and voted on by you, my subscribers. Thanks. Let's get back into it. James Dean became famous after acting in only 3 movies, but his real passion was car racing. Just over a week before his death, he bought a Porsche 550 Spyder for $6,800, the equivalent of over $82,000. After his dear mother died of cancer when he was only 9 and his father abandoned him with other family, he developed a very reckless and risk-taking personality. He often sped around LA in his cars, but the Spyder was a new coveted possession. He took so much pride in his car. Little bastard. The movie studios that he had contracts with specifically put in his contracts that he was not allowed to race during the filming of movies because they were scared that he would crash and he would either be so injured that he wouldn't be able to act or he would just die. Now, the car, he bought it just 9 days before he died. 2 days after he bought the car, he had been out to dinner when he invited a famous British actor, Alec Guinness, to sit with him. Dean was so proud of his new car that he just had to show it off. But it didn't have the effect that he expected. Now, here's where the story becomes unnerving. When shown the car, Guinness got a very uneasy feeling and straight up told James Dean, if you continue to drive this car, you'll be dead within a week. James Dean, the speed demon that he was, brushed it off, not realizing how prophetic those words were. He was on his way to a race in Salinas, California, excited to drive the Spider for the first time in a race. In the seat beside him was his mechanic, Rolf Wutherick, who convinced him to drive the car to the race as a way to break it in, so to speak, as opposed to towing it to the race like normal. Just before leaving to go to the race, James Dean called his best friend in a last-ditch attempt to convince him to come along to see him race the Spider for the first time. But his best friend already had other plans, and Dean's last words to this friend, just hours before his own death, were, "It's your funeral." Again, not knowing that there would be a twist of fate. Outside of a California town called Shalom, where Route 1 crossed Route 46, James Dean's car collided head-on with another car. But what was strange was that it was still pretty light out. It was a straight stretch of road, and there weren't any visual obstructions. The sports car crumpled and did nothing to protect either of its passengers. James Dean had been trapped, and his mechanic was thrown from the car. After James Dean was pried out of the car, both men were put into an ambulance and were then rushed to the closest hospital, which was 25 miles away. But either part of the curse or perhaps just really bad luck, the ambulance hit another vehicle during the drive, which, although minor, caused the paramedics to have to get out to assess any damage. This is notable because James Dean, who had been breathing when placed into the ambulance, had suffered a broken neck and severe head trauma. In the first accident, that is. This was over a decade before cervical collars were used, so it is possible that this second accident may have been the final nail in the coffin, since James Dean was declared dead on arrival to the hospital. He was only 24 years old. If that was where the story ended, we could just say the whole thing was a fateful tragedy. The car was completely totaled, but parts of Little Bastard were cannibalized for other cars. The thing is, the cars that had the transplanted parts tended to have accidents themselves. A fellow racer, Dr. Willem Esrich, who James Dean had raced against several times before, put the engine of Little Bastard into his Lotus. After completing several races safely, and just over a year after James Dean's death, the Lotus was involved in an accident during a race in Pomona. The car rolled and caused the driver some injuries. Luckily, though, he survived. His friend, Dr. Troy McHenry, had also been in the same race, and it seems that the curse was out for blood that day. Esrich lent McHenry the transmission and the suspension system from Little Bastard for his car that day. McHenry lost control of his car, which flew off the road, hitting a tree and killing him. The remains of the body of Little Bastard were sold and were rebuilt, just enough to be put on display for car shows as the cursed car of James Dean. Well, in 1959, while temporarily being stored in a garage in Fresno, the garage suffered a fire. Luckily, or unluckily, the car sustained only a little damage from that particular incident, and whether by fate, design, or a result of the curse. Just a year after the fire, what remained of Little Bastard disappeared during transport from one car show to another, and it's still missing to this day. Now, in Frankfort, Kentucky, there is a historical museum dedicated to Kentucky state history. The Kentucky Historical Society has all kinds of exhibits that you would expect, ones that feature whiskey and state leaders, horse racing. But there is one object in the museum that stands out from all the others: a dresser. There isn't anything about it that would make it stand out, but it isn't just a dresser. It has a body count. This dresser is known as the Conjure Chest, and from the time that it was built to the time that it was relinquished to the museum, it left behind dozens of victims. This includes a dozen deaths, a few devastating illnesses, a marriage abandonment, and a couple of stabbings. Needless to say, it's got bad juju. Now, the story goes back to around 1830. A man named Jeremiah had the chest hand-carved by one of his slaves in preparation for the birth of his first child. But when the chest was finished and brought to him, he decided that this chest, the one that had lasted 200 years, wasn't good enough, and he had the slave we know now as Remus beaten to death. The slaves had no legal way to get justice, so they relied on old magic and put a curse on the chest using dried owl's blood. Its first victim was the baby, the same one that the chest had been built for. The child died as an infant. It was at this point that the dresser began to be passed around from relative to relative. Now, I could make an entire video that went through all of the victims of the conjured chest, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to focus on the more notable cases. Now, the chest ended up in the possession of Jeremiah's nephew, who you can imagine used it as a dresser. Unknown to the family at the time, that pretty much guaranteed that he would not live a long life. And he didn't. He was stabbed to death by a servant, or a slave most likely, on his 21st birthday. Eventually, after being passed around, the chest belonged to Lucy Gregory, and for one Christmas, she had made her son, Emmett, 32 years old, a pair of gloves and a scarf. After finishing them, before gifting them to Emmett, she stored them where? In the chest, the cursed chest. It was December 11th, 1909, when Emmett met his early demise. He was a railroad worker and had been trying to get off of a train when he slipped between the beams of a trestle and fell 30 feet to his death. In December 1944, Wilbur Brister owned the chest. Well, that was until he died. He was rushed to the hospital for surgery with appendicitis. It was during that operation that Wilbur died, but not because of blood loss or infection. He died from an overdose of ether, which was the anesthetic used on him. The last victim of the conjured chest was Richard Cleveland. He was just a teenager when he began to use the chest. Less than 1 week after putting his clothes in the chest, he was stabbed through the hand while at school. Understandably freaked out, his mother, Virginia, who grew up knowing about the chest and decided to put it in his room anyway, decided that enough was enough. And in 1946, she asked a long-trusted maid, Sally, to help break the curse. They performed a ritual, and Sally told her that if either of them died before the bush that was used in the ritual lost all of its leaves in the fall, that the curse would be broken. And Sally died in September. Even so, Virginia didn't trust that their ritual had actually worked, and she kept it away from everyone. But as she grew old, to make sure that the dresser could never hurt anyone again, she donated it to the Kentucky Historical Society in 1976. When asked about why it was donated to the museum, her daughter Beverly said, "I don't think she would turn it loose. I mean, imagine putting it out on the curb, knowing that someone might put items into it and then die." And that's it for today. Again, like, subscribe, try your hand at the trivia question below. If you're looking for more spooky Halloween fun, check out these videos. And as always, don't forget to be merry, but stay morbid. I'm done. Anyway.